Sensors didn't just fail. They chose to go blind. An unknown ship appeared where it shouldn't exist. Too fast, too silent, too aware. It wasn't attacking. It was watching. And the worst part, it already knew how humanity would respond. Before we did. The first thing that failed wasn't the sensors. It was certainty. The Orion defense grid had stood unbroken for 212 years. A lattice of steel and code stretched across entire star systems, watching, calculating, predicting. It had survived wars that scorched planets, cosmic storms that swallowed suns, and sabotage from within its own creators. It was not designed to fail. It was designed to outlast everything. So when every single node in the grid went dark at exactly the same moment, there was no alarm at first, just confusion, then silence, then fear. Commander Elias Varn stood on the bridge of the odious Vanguard, staring at a wall of dead screens that had once been alive with motion and data. The usual symphony of information trajectory lines, heat signatures, predictive models was gone, replaced by static, not chaotic static, controlled static, like something was intentionally filling the void. Status, Varn said, his voice calm, almost too calm. No one answered immediately. That was the first sign something was wrong. His crew was trained to respond instantly. But now, they hesitated, like their instincts themselves had been interrupted. Mira Cade, the youngest analyst on the deck, finally spoke, her voice tight. All systems are reporting null. Not offline, not damaged. Just null. Varn frowned. That's not a state. I know, she said quietly. And then the static changed. Not gradually. Instantly. Every screen across the bridge flickered once, sharply, like a synchronized blink. And then it appeared. A shape. No sensor lock. No data feed. Just an image forced into existence across every display. A ship. Long. Jagged. Asymmetrical in a way that made the eye uncomfortable. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it, bending the stars behind it into warped streaks. It wasn't just unfamiliar. It was wrong. Varn stepped closer. Tell me we're seeing the same thing, he said. Yes, sir, Mira replied. All decks are reporting visual confirmation. Source, unknown. Origin, unknown. Velocity. Mira hesitated. Too fast. That answer hung in the air like a bad joke. No one dared laugh at. Varn narrowed his eyes. Define too fast. Mira swallowed. It's not moving through space. It's changing position without transition. As if to prove her point, the ship flickered. One moment it was near the outer edge of the system. The next, it wasn't there. It hadn't traveled. It had simply stopped being in one place and started being in another. No acceleration, no deceleration, no path, just existence. Relocated. A murmur spread across the bridge. Even the veterans felt it now. That creeping, primal unease. This wasn't an enemy they understood. This wasn't even something they could categorize. It was something that ignored the rules entirely. Track it, Varn ordered. We can't. Mira said. There's nothing to track. Varn exhaled slowly. Then we observe. Hours passed, then days, and the silence spread. One by one, stations across the Orion grid went dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone from the network. Ships sent to investigate found nothing wrong physically. Power systems were intact, hull integrity perfect, crews alive. But systems refused to function, as if the concept of operation had been removed from them. And before each blackout, there was always the same report, the same impossible sighting. The ship, Watcham Varn, stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic projections that flickered inconsistently, struggling to maintain cohesion. Pattern? He asked. None, Mira replied. It doesn't follow routes. It doesn't repeat positions. It doesn't behave. Varn crossed his arms. Everything behaves. Not this, she said softly. He didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew she might be right. The ship began appearing inside restricted zones. Not crossing into them. Just already there. It hovered within military formations during drills, unnoticed until someone looked directly at it. It lingered above command stations without triggering a single alarm. It existed in spaces it had no right to exist in, and still, it did nothing. No weapons, no signals, no aggression, just presence, just observation. And that made it worse. Because intent could be counted, but observation Observation meant learning. The realization came quietly. Too quietly. "Sir," Mira said one evening, her voice almost hesitant. "There's something else." Varn turned. "Go on. Not everyone sees it." The room fell silent. "Exclaim. Some cruise report." The ship cleared, the others. "See nothing. Same coordinates. Same time. Different perception." Varn felt something tighten in his chest. "Run a comparison," he said. "I already did." Mira hesitated. "There's no common factor. No rank. No role. No location. Then what is there?" She looked at him. Fear in her eyes. Response patterns. Varn didn't understand at first. Then it clicked. The ship wasn't invisible. It was selective. It was choosing who could perceive it, based on how they reacted. Testing. Filtering. Studying. Not humanity as a whole, but individuals. "It's learning," Varn said quietly. And somewhere deep inside him, a colder thought formed. And adapting. The tension escalated rapidly after that. Fleets were mobilized. Orders became aggressive. The unknown was no longer just observed, it was feared. "We engage on sight," High Command transmitted. But Varn hesitated. Something about the ship felt deliberate, not hostile, not peaceful, intentional. Like every action or lack of action was part of something larger. Then came the moment that changed everything. "Sir," Mira said, her voice shaking now. It just appeared inside Earth's core defense perimeter. Varn's blood ran cold. That was impossible. The core ring was the most heavily guarded space in human territory. Nothing entered without layers of authorization, scanning, verification. Nothing. And yet, there it was, hanging in orbit. Silent. Watching. The bridge erupted into motion. Weapon systems came online. Targeting arrays locked onto the object, though. None could confirm a valid solution. "Awaiting firing command," an officer said. All eyes turned to Varn. This was the moment. The decision that would define everything that followed. His finger hovered near the command interface. Fire, or wait. Logic screamed at him to eliminate the unknown. But something deeper, something instinctive, told him that would be a mistake. The ship hadn't attacked. It hadn't harmed it, had only observed. And if it was learning, then firing might teach it the wrong lesson. "Hold," Varn said. The officer blinked. "Sir, stand down." The weapons powered down reluctantly, as if even the systems disagreed with him. Silence filled the bridge. And then, the ship stopped. Not just physically, something else shifted. Like the entire system acknowledged the decision. The dead screens flickered back to life. Data streams returned. Systems rebooted. But instead of tactical overlays, a single waveform appeared. "Audio incoming transmission," Myra whispered. Varn stared at the display. "Play it." Static filled the room. Then, a voice.com. "Controlled. Precise Commander Elias Varn." Every muscle in his body locked. "You chose not to fire." The room froze, not because of what it said, but because of how it said it. The voice wasn't synthetic. It wasn't alien. It was human. It was his. Varn slowly stepped back, his reflection trembling faintly in the glass. "That's not possible," someone whispered. But Varn knew better. The ship didn't follow possibility. It followed something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. Understanding. And as the transmission ended, one final realization settled over him like a shadow. This wasn't first contact. This was evaluation. And humanity had just taken its first test. The first report sounded like a joke. A bad one. The kind pilots told each other after long patrols, when sleep deprivation blurred the line between humor and delusion. "Sir." It outran the signal. Lieutenant Aria's soul replayed the data again, her eyes locked on the flickering timeline like it might suddenly admit it was wrong. It didn't. The quantum relay ping, a system designed to transmit information instantaneously across vast distances, had been sent from their patrol ship toward command. And yet, the unknown vessel had already changed position before the signal. Registered. Not at the same time. Not after. Before. Aria leaned back slowly, exhaling through clenched teeth. "That's not speed," she murmured. Captain Rourke stood behind her, arms folded, watching the same impossible playback with the expression of a man who had seen too much to be easily shaken. But not enough to ignore something like this. "Then what is it?" he asked. Aria hesitated. Her mind ran through equations, physics models, theoretical loopholes. None of them worked. None of them even came close. "It's cheating," she said finally. Rourke raised an eyebrow. "That's not a scientific classification. It is today, Aria shot back, though there was no real humor in it. The patrol cruiser drifted at the edge of a fractured, gravitational corridor, a region of space where reality already bent slightly out of shape. Stars warped at the edges of vision. Time dilation caused minor discrepancies in clocks that the crew had long learned to ignore. But this wasn't a minor discrepancy. This was reality itself misfiring. The unknown ship had been appearing intermittently for days. Sometimes it was detected before it arrived. Sometimes it vanished before sensors registered it. Some sensors logs showed it present in two places at once for fractions of a second. The data didn't just conflict, it contradicted itself. Aria couldn't let it go. She stopped attending meals, slept in short, restless bursts beside her console. Every spare moment was spent analyzing the ship's appearances, mapping inconsistencies, chasing patterns that didn't want to be found. Rourke noticed. Of course, he always did. "You're going to burn out," he said one night, leaning against the doorway as she worked. Aria didn't look up. "I'm close." "You've said that for 2 days." "Because I am." Rourke sighed, stepping closer. "Aria, this isn't a puzzle you solve by staring at it harder." She finally turned to him, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. "That's exactly how puzzles work." He almost smiled. "Almost. Not this one." She looked back at the data, quieter now. "If we don't understand it, we can't predict it, and if we can't predict it," he asked, "then we're already too late." That hung in the air longer than either of them liked. Hours later, something shifted. A tiny inconsistency. A delay that shouldn't have been there. Aria froze, then rapidly pulled up additional logs, cross-referencing timestamps, overlaying trajectories. Her breathing quickened. No way." "What?" Rourke stepped closer. Aria turned the screen toward him. "Look at this sequence." He frowned, scanning the data. "I don't see it's not moving fast," she interrupted. "It's not moving at all." Rourke blinked. "Explain." Aria swallowed, her voice lowering as if saying it too loudly might break it. "It's arriving, before it decides to move." Silence. Rourke stared at her. "That's nonsense." "I know," she said quickly. "But it fits the data. Every inconsistency, every contradiction, they all disappear if the ship exists slightly outside linear time." Rourke rubbed his temples. "You're telling me it chooses an outcome first, and then reality rearranges itself to make that outcome happen?" Aria nodded slowly. "Exactly." He let out a long breath. "And you're okay with that conclusion?" She gave a faint, tired smile. "Not even a little, but it's the only one that works." From that moment on, everything changed. Aria stopped trying to track the ship. Instead, she tried to anticipate it. If it existed outside time, then maybe, just maybe, its behavior could still leave echoes. Patterns not in space, but in possibility. She began mapping probabilities instead of positions, predicting where the ship might appear, based on what hadn't happened yet. The first time she got it right, no one noticed. The second time, "Rourke, did you call that?" he said quietly. Aria nodded, her focus unbroken. "Lucky guess." The third time, it wasn't luck anymore. "Command needs to see this," Rourke said. Aria shook her head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I don't understand it," she said. "I'm just following it." Rourke studied her carefully. "That's what worries me." Days passed. Aria's predictions became more precise. Minutes before appearances turned into hours, then longer. It was as if she was syncing with the ship, aligning her thoughts with its impossible logic. And that's when the side effects began. Headaches at first, then memory gaps. Small ones. A missing minute here. A forgotten sentence there. "You need to stop," Rourke said firmly, after finding her staring blankly at her console for nearly a full minute. Aria blinked, disoriented. "Stop what?" "This," he said, gesturing to the data. "Whatever you're doing, it's not just analysis anymore." She hesitated, then looked back at the screen. "I'm close. You keep saying that." "Because I can feel it," she whispered. Rourke's voice softened. "Aria, you're losing yourself." She smiled faintly, a hint of something sad behind it. "Already did." The final prediction came without warning. No data, no calculation, just a sudden, overwhelming certainty. Aria straightened abruptly. "It's coming." Rourke turned. "Where?" She hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly. As coordinates filled the screen, Rourke frowned. "What?" Aria stared at the numbers. "These coordinates? They're..." Her voice faltered. "They're my home colony." "That's not possible." Rourke said immediately. It is, Aria whispered. The patrol cruiser adjusted course, engines humming as it accelerated toward the quiet, unremarkable world. A place of no strategic value, no military importance. Just a home. Cinematic shot. A peaceful colony world, clouds drifting lazily across blue skies, unaware of what's coming. And then the ship appeared. No flash, no warning. Just there, hovering silently above the atmosphere, waiting. Aria stepped closer to the viewport, her reflection overlapping the distant, impossible shape. It's not following patterns, she said softly. Rourke stood beside her. Then what is it? Following? Aria didn't answer immediately, because she already knew. Slowly, she turned her head to look at him. Me. The word hung between them like a shockwave. Rourke's expression hardened. That's not funny. I'm not joking, she said. Every prediction, every appearance. It's been aligning with my thoughts. That's impossible. So is everything about this. She snapped, then immediately softened, I think. It's aware of me. Rourke didn't like that. Not at all. Then we leave, he said. Now. But Aria didn't move. She couldn't, because in that moment, something shifted. Not in space, not in time, in her mind. A thought that wasn't hers, but felt like it was. A quiet, undeniable certainty. It knows she, her breath caught. It knows, she whispered. Knows what? Rourke demanded. She swallowed. Everything. And then the ship moved. Or rather, it didn't. One moment it was there. The next, it wasn't. No transition. No trace. Just absence. The sky above the colony returned to its peaceful blue, as if nothing had happened. But something had. On Aria's console, a single data point appeared. A coordinate, already entered, already known. Her hand shook as she stared at it, because it wasn't just her home. It was something deeper, something buried. A memory she hadn't accessed in years. A place tied to a moment she had never shared with anyone, not even Rourke. Slowly, she leaned back, her voice barely audible. That's not possible. Rourke looked at her. What? Aria's eyes remained fixed on the screen, wide with a realization that chilled her to the core. I never told anyone about this. She swallowed hard. Not even myself. And yet, the ship knew. The first thing people noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, no, that came. Later, it was the absence of change. A child mid-laugh, frozen, a glass mid-fall, suspended inches above the ground. Wind caught in the trees, leaves hanging motionless like a paused memory. And above it all, the ship. It appeared without warning over the colony of Erendor-7, a quiet world known more for its oceans than its strategic value. No alarms triggered, no defense systems activated. One moment, the sky was empty. The next, it wasn't. Then time stopped. Everywhere. For everyone. Except one man. Dr. Kelren didn't realize it immediately. At first, it felt like a strange stillness, like the world had taken a breath and forgotten to exhale. He was walking through the colony's central plaza when it happened, mid-thought. Then he noticed the birds, hanging in the air, not gliding, not hovering, just still. He frowned, taking another step. The sound of his own footsteps echoed too loudly, unnatural in the frozen quiet. Hello, he called out. No response. He turned slowly, his eyes widening as the truth settled in. People stood frozen mid-motion, faces locked in expressions that would never complete. A woman reaching for her child. A man turning his head. A vendor midst Kale's heart began to race. This isn't real, he whispered. But it was. Above him, the sky shifted. Not with clouds. With presence. The ship hung there, vast and silent. Its surface bending light like it didn't fully belong in this reality. Kale felt it then. Not fear. Not exactly. Awareness. Like something was looking directly at him. Why me? He muttered. And then everything changed. The world around him flickered. Not physically, but perceptually. The frozen colony blurred, dissolving into something else. He was no longer in the plaza. He was somewhere darker, enclosed. Smooth metallic walls curved around him, reflecting faint, distorted versions of himself. The air felt different, thinner, but not suffocating. Controlled. Okay. Kale exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. This is first contact. He almost laughed. A hollow, disbelieving sound. Of course it is. A xenolinguist by trade, Cale had spent his life studying alien communication, preparing for a moment like this. And yet, now that it was here, he had no idea where to begin. "Hello," he said again. Softer this time. No answer. Instead, the space around him shifted, not with movement, but with memory. Suddenly, he wasn't standing anymore. He was kneeling. The metallic walls were gone, replaced by dirt beneath his hands. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed in the distance. Cale's breath caught. No, it was a memory, but not his. He looked down at his hands, smaller, trembling. A child's hands. Around him, chaos unfolded. Buildings burned. Figures ran, their faces twisted in terror. A war zone. A massacre. Cale staggered back, the scene collapsing as quickly as it had formed. He was back in the metallic chamber, gasping. "You're showing me something," he said, his voice shaking. "Why?" The answer came, not in words. Another memory. This time, he stood in a pristine lab. Scientists in white coats moved around him, their faces focused, detached. On a table in the center lay a creature, alien, small, fragile, alive, and terrified. Cale felt a knot form in his stomach as he watched the scientists begin their work. The creature's silent screams echoed louder than any sound. He turned away. "Stop," he said. But it didn't stop. Memory after memory flooded him. War, destruction, cruelty, moments of humanity, at its worst. Not random, curated, selected. The message was clear. This wasn't communication. This was evaluation. Cale dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "You're not trying to understand our language," he realized. "You're trying to understand us." The memory stopped. Silence returned. Heavy, expectant. Cale slowly lifted his head. "You want to know if we're worth it?" he said. "If we're worth what?" Saving. No response. But he felt something shift. Like attention focusing more sharply. Waiting. For him. Cale laughed weakly. "No pressure, right?" He pushed himself to his feet, pacing slowly. His mind raced. Words wouldn't work. Language wouldn't work. Whatever this entity was, it didn't communicate that way. It experienced. It observed. It judged through memory and emotion. "You want an answer?" Cale said. "Not a translation." He stopped, his chest tightening, because he knew what that meant. He had to show it something. Not just any memory. A defining one. Something that represented humanity. His thoughts flickered through countless possibilities. Moments of beauty, of discovery, of love. But they all felt insufficient. Too small. Too easy. Then another memory surfaced. One he hadn't thought about in years. One he had tried to forget. Cale closed his eyes. "All right," he whispered. "You want to see us?" He exhaled slowly. "Then see this." The world shifted again. He was older, standing in a collapsing research outpost on a distant world. Alarms blared. Fire spread through the corridors. And in his arms, a child. Not human. Alien. Injured. Fragile. He remembered this. The mission had gone wrong. The outpost had been attacked. Evacuation was impossible. He had a choice. Save himself. Or stay. He stayed. The memory played out in vivid detail. Cale running. Through burning hallways, shielding the child from falling debris. Ignoring orders to evacuate. Ignoring the voice in his head screaming at him to survive. Reaching the escape pod. Only one seat. He looked down at the child. Then at the pod. Then back again. And without hesitation, he placed the child inside. The door sealed. The pod launched. Cale remained behind. The memory ended there. Back. In the chamber, Cale opened his eyes slowly. His chest rose and fell with quiet intensity. "That's us," he said softly. "Not perfect. Not innocent. But capable. Of choosing something better." Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Then, the world snapped back. The plaza. The colony. Sound returned in a sudden rush. The glass shattered against the ground. The child finished their laugh. The wind resumed its gentle motion. Time had resumed. People looked around, confused, unaware that anything had happened. Except, something had. Cale stood in the center of it all, breathing heavily, his heart still racing. Above him, the ship was gone. No trace. No signal. Nothing. He let out a shaky breath, a small, disbelieving smile forming. "Well," he muttered. "That was subtle." Days later, reports began to surface. Not of the ship, but of something else. People across the colony described the same memory, not their own. Kale's, the burning outpost, the choice, the sacrifice, shared across thousands of minds like a quiet echo. Kale stared at the reports, a strange mix of awe and unease settling in his chest. You didn't just watch, he whispered. You listened. And somewhere, far beyond the edges of known space, something had made a decision. The fleet didn't explode. That was the first detail that made it terrifying. No fire, no debris, no desperate last transmissions screaming into the void. One moment. The 7th Imperial Armada, thousands of warships strong-hung in perfect formation above the contested world of Carthage. The next, it was gone. Not scattered, not destroyed, just absent. As if reality itself had quietly decided it no longer belonged there. The only thing left behind was silent sand, a single, distorted sensor echo that no one could explain. Admiral Tessa Virel watched the recording in absolute stillness. Her hands clasped behind her back so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Around her, the war room buzzed with restrained panic. Officers whispered. Analysts argued in hushed tones. But Tessa said nothing. She simply watched the moment again, and again, and again. 3 seconds, an analyst said carefully. Total disappearance across the entire fleet. Tessa's voice was calm, controlled. Cause unknown. Weapon signature, none. Survivors. The analyst hesitated. No. Tessa nodded once. Then it wasn't a battle. The room fell silent. Because if it wasn't a battle, then what was it? The answer came sooner than expected. Admiral, another officer called out, his voice tight. We're receiving reports from outer sectors. Tessa turned slightly. Go on. Multiple fleets. Gone. Same pattern. No engagement. No debris. A pause. And something, who is seen before each incident. Tessa's gaze sharpened. Show me. The main display flickered, resolving into a grainy visual. A shape hung in the void, angular, distorted, familiar. The same ship reported across the Orion grid. The same impossible presence that defied detection and logic. It didn't attack. It didn't fire. It simply existed. And then fleets ceased to exist around it. Tessa studied it carefully, her expression unreadable. It's targeting us, someone whispered. Or testing us, another added. Tessa finally spoke. No, the room turned to her. It's selecting us. The distinction was subtle, but it changed everything. Orders were issued immediately. Defensive formations tightened. Patrol routes adjusted. Contingency plans activated. But beneath the structure and discipline, something else spread quietly through the ranks. Fear. Not of defeat, but of irrelevance. Because he couldn't fight something that didn't engage. Days passed. Then weeks. The ship appeared, always near military assets. Always near power. And always, destruction followed. But never in the way anyone expected. No weapons fired. No warnings given. Just removal. As if entire fleets were being erased from the equation. There is to be a pattern, Tessa said during a high-level briefing. There is, an intelligence officer replied cautiously. But you're not going to like it. Tessa didn't react. Continued. The officer brought up a series of classified reports, each marked with red indicators. Every fleet that was removed had a documented history of violations. Violations, Tessa repeated. War crimes, the officer clarified. The room shifted uncomfortably. Tessa's eyes narrowed slightly. To find the officer swallowed. Unauthorized orbital strikes. Civilian targeting. Excessive force during occupation. He hesitated. Command decisions that were later buried. Silence followed. Heavy. Oppressive. Because everyone, in that room, understood what that meant. This wasn't random. This wasn't strategic. It was deliberate. The ship wasn't hunting enemies. It was judging them. Tessa turned back to the display, her reflection faintly visible over the distorted image of the ship. And what about fleets without such records? She asked. No incidents reported, the officer said quietly. Then it's not a weapon. Someone muttered. It's a verdict. Tessa didn't respond. But something shifted behind her eyes. Something quieter. More personal. Because buried deep within the Empire's classified archives were records that never made it to official reports, orders given in desperation, decisions made in the heat of war, decisions that couldn't be undone. And Tessa Virel had made many of them. The next encounter came without warning. Admiral, the com officer said sharply. Unknown contact. Directly ahead. Tessa stepped forward, her posture rigid. On screen, the display lit up. There it was, closer than ever before. The ship hovered in front of her flagship, silent and unmoving. No fleet, no support. Just her. Just it. The air on the bridge felt heavier, like the weight of something unseen pressing down on everyone at once. "Weapons ready," an officer said. Tessa raised a hand. "Hold." She stared at the ship, her expression unreadable. "It's not here to fight," she said quietly. "Then why is it here?" someone asked. Tessa didn't answer. Because, deep down, she already knew. The lights on the bridge flickered, not from damage, from interference. The displays shifted, replacing tactical overlays with something else. Footage. Old. Grainy. Classified. Tessa's breath caught just slyly, because she recognized it instantly. 10 years ago. A rebellion. Civilian infrastructure used as cover by insurgents. Orders had been unclear. Time had been limited. She had made a decision. Orbital strike authorized. Her younger voice echoed through the bridge. The footage showed it clearly. The blast. The destruction. The collateral damage. The silence that followed. Tessa's jaw tightened. Around her the crew stood frozen, unsure whether to look away or keep watching. "It wasn't that simple," she said, her voice low. The footage didn't respond. It simply played. Over and over. The moment she had buried. The decision she had justified. The lives she had written off as necessary losses. "You don't understand context," she said, louder now. "There were variables, risks, consequences." The ship remained silent, but the message was clear. Context didn't erase outcome. Tessa closed her eyes briefly. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it fully. The weight, the doubt, the question she had never truly answered. Was it the right call? When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. Not in the ship. In herself. "Weapons offline," she said calmly. The crew hesitated. "Admiral, that's an..." Order systems powered down one by one. The bridge fell into an uneasy quiet. Tessa stepped forward, standing alone before the viewport. "I made that choice," she said, "and I would make it again, because I believed it was necessary." A pause. Her voice softened, just slightly. "But that doesn't make it right." Silence stretched. Then the footage vanished. The displays returned to normal. The ship remained for a moment longer. And then, without movement, without transition, it was gone, just like the others. The crew exhaled collectively, tension breaking like a released spring. But something was different. Tessa turned back to the main display. "Status, all systems operational," an officer reported. "No damage. No anomalies. None." Another pause. "Except," Tessa looked at him. "Say it." He swallowed. "There's a marking on the hull." External cameras shifted, zooming in on the flagship's surface. There, etched into the armor where no tool could have reached, was a symbol. Unfamiliar. Precise. Intentional. Not a warning. Not a threat. A mark. Tessa stared at it, her expression unreadable. "What does it mean?" someone asked quietly. Tessa didn't answer immediately, because deep down, she understood. This wasn't punishment. Not yet. This was something else. Something far more unsettling. Judgment. Postponed. She turned away from the screen, her voice steady once more. "Log it," she said. A pause. Then, almost to herself, judgment deferred. The map ended where Cerny did. Beyond that, line drawn in cautious ink across countless star charts, was a region simply labeled not because it was empty, but because everything that had tried to define it had failed. Explorer Yalan Cross had spent most of his life chasing that line. While others saw danger, he saw possibility. While the Empire marked it as a boundary, he saw an invitation. So when the first report came, an unknown ship emerging from beyond mapped space, he didn't hesitate. "We're going," he said, already halfway to the command deck. His crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. They had followed Yalan this far, into the unknown, into places that didn't make sense, and somehow, always came back. But this time felt different. The ship didn't just appear, it returned, as if it had come from somewhere humanity had never been and perhaps was never meant to go. The vessel was first sighted drifting at the edge of the map, its silhouette warped against the darkness beyond. It didn't transmit, didn't react, didn't acknowledge their presence at all. It simply moved, slow, deliberate, like it was expecting to be followed. Yalan leaned forward in his chair, eyes locked on the display. It's not avoiding us, he murmured. It's leading us. Or luring us. His navigator muttered. Under her breath, Yalin smiled faintly. Same thing. Depends on how it ends. Cinematic shot. Jalen's exploration ship slipping past the last known marker. Stars thinning into unfamiliar patterns as the known galaxy fades behind them. The moment they crossed the boundary, something subtle changed. Instruments began to fluctuate and all failing. Just uncertain. Star positions didn't align perfectly with predictions. Timestamps drifted by fractions of a second. Enough to notice, not enough to explain. We're still in real space, right? Someone asked. No one answered immediately. Yalin didn't seem concerned. If anything, he looked more alive than he had in years. Stay on it, he said. Whatever it is, we're not losing it now. The ship ahead continued its silent journey, never accelerating, never slowing. Always just far enough ahead to remain visible. Always just close enough to follow. Hours turned into days. Then, the first world appeared. It wasn't on any chart. A planet, blue and green, orbiting a dim star that shouldn't have supported life and yet clearly did. Scanning, the science officer said. A pause. No active signals, no status, none. No structures. There are structures. Jalen's eyes narrowed slightly. Define our. They're there, the officer said. But nothing's use in them. They descended cautiously. The landing site was pristine. Too pristine. Buildings stood intact, untouched by decay. Streets were clean. Systems powered but idle. It was as if the entire civilization had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Hello. One crew member called out as they moved through the silent city. The word echoed strangely, like the air itself wasn't used to sound anymore. Yalin walked slowly, taking it all in. No signs of violence, no damage, no bodies, just absence. This isn't abandonment, he said quietly. This is removal. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. By what? Someone asked. Yalin didn't answer, because deep down, he already suspected. The ship waited in orbit the entire time. Silent, patient, watching, as if it had brought them here. For a reason, they left soon after. Not because they wanted to, but because there was nothing else to find. The mystery wasn't on the planet. It was ahead of them, and so they followed. The second world was different. Deserted, but not intact. Structures partially eroded, systems failing. Time had clearly passed here, but the pattern remained the same. No bodies, no evidence of conflict, just disappearance. Two civilizations, the navigator said quietly. Same outcome. That's not a coincidence, Yalin replied. That's a pattern. By the third world, the tension had settled into something heavier, something closer to dread. This one was ancient, ruins barely holding together, atmospheric decay, signs that whatever had happened a long time ago. And yet, the same absence, every one of them, the science officer whispered. Gone. Yalin stood at the edge of a crumbling structure, staring out at the lifeless landscape. No, he said softly. Not gone. The others looked at him. Then what? He exhaled slowly. Taken. Silence followed. Because that possibility was far worse. The realization came fully into focus when they cross-referenced data from all three worlds. They all recorded the same anomaly, the navigator said, her voice tight. Right before disappearance. Yalin didn't need to ask what it was. He already knew. The ship. It hadn't just appeared for humanity. It had appeared for all of them. And they were all gone. The question wasn't if it was responsible. The question was why. We keep going, Yalin said. No one argued this time. Not because they agreed, but because they needed answers. The final world was perfect. That was the only word for it. A fully intact civilization. Advanced, thriving. At least, it had been. The cities were alive with detail. Lights still active. Systems still running. Doors still open. As if the inhabitants had vanished seconds ago. This just happened, someone whispered. Yalin felt his chest tighten. We're not late, he said. We're right on time. They moved quickly through the city, searching for any clue that might explain what had happened. And then they found it. A central structure, larger than the rest. A place of importance. Inside, at the very center, was a single message. Not written. Not spoken. Embedded. A recording, waiting to be found. Yalin activated it without hesitation. The room dimmed slightly as the message played. A figure appeared alien, but unmistakably intelligent. Its expression was something Yalin recognized instantly. Fear. If you are seeing this, the figure said, its voice translated imperfectly by their systems, then it is already too late. Jalen's pulse quickened. We encountered it, the figure continued. We studied it. We believed we understood it. A pause. We were wrong. The image flickered slightly. It does not destroy. It does not conquer. The figure's voice dropped, trembling. It chooses silence. Filled the room. And when it chooses, you are no longer part of what comes next. The recording ended abruptly. No explanation. No resolution. Just that warning. Yalin stood there, unmoving, his mind racing, his heart pounding. We were not ready, he whispered. The words echoed faintly through the empty structure. And then, something shifted. Not in the room, not on the planet, in orbit. Captain, the navigator's voice came through urgently. The ship, it's moving. Yalin looked up instinctively, though he couldn't see it from here. Where? A pause. Away, Jalen's breath caught. Because for the first time since this began, the ship was leaving. Not disappearing. Not relocating. Leaving. Like his task here was complete. He closed his eyes briefly, the weight of realization settling heavily over him. It wasn't guiding us, he said quietly. It was showing us. The crew looked at him, unease written across every face. Showing us what? Someone asked. Yalin opened his eyes slowly. What happens next? No one spoke after that, because they all understood. This wasn't a warning. It was a demonstration. And now it was their turn. The first anomaly didn't trigger alarms. It triggered arguments. That's not possible, one scientist muttered, staring at the data like it had personally offended him. It's not just possible, another replied quietly. It's happening. Dr. Lena Iqbal stood at the center of the orbital research station, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a cascade of equations that refused to behave. She had built her career on proving others wrong, on tearing apart flawed theories, and replacing them with something better, something real. But this wasn't flawed, it was impossible. Run it again, she said calmly. We already did, her assistant replied. 3 times. Then run it a 4th. The data didn't change. It only got worse. The object, if it could even be called that, had appeared in multiple observational states simultaneously. Visible and invisible. Present and absent. Detected and undetected. Not in sequence. Not in layers. All at once. Lena exhaled slowly, rubbing her temple. So either every instrument we have is broken, or reality is. The assistant finished. Lena gave a faint, humorless smile. I hate that those are the only 2 options. Cinematic shot. The research station orbiting Earth, surrounded by flickering sensor arrays, struggling to interpret something they were never designed to see. The object itself, the same unknown ship reported across the Empire, hung just beyond Earth's orbit, silent, still, and completely uninterested in explaining itself. Military command wanted it destroyed, that much was clear. We cannot allow an unknown entity to remain this close to Earth, a general's voice echoed through the comms. Lena didn't look up from her work. You can't destroy something you can't define, she replied. Then define it faster. She almost laughed at that. Almost. Instead, she turned back to the equations. Something about them was wrong. Not incorrect, just incomplete. Like trying to describe a 3-dimensional object using only 2-dimensional math. It's not breaking physics, she said slowly. Her assistant frowned. Then what is it doing? Lena's eyes narrowed. Slightly. It's ignoring our version of physics. Silence followed. Because that was somehow worse. The realization settled in piece by piece. Every anomaly. Every contradiction. They weren't errors. They were indicators. Evidence of a system operating on rules humanity didn't understand yet. We're not advanced, Lena said quietly. We're early. The words tasted bitter. For centuries, humanity had believed itself to be at the cutting edge of understanding, masters of science, architects of reality. And now, they were students again. The shift came without warning. One moment, the ship was simply there. The next, it acted. Gravity fluctuation detected. Someone shouted. Lena looked up sharply. The station trembled slightly, not from force, but from inconsistency. Artificial gravity systems flickered as local gravitational constants shifted unpredictably. That's not possible, the assistant said again. Lena didn't respond this time. because she was too busy watching the equations rewrite themselves in real time. Time itself began to stutter, not visibly, not to the naked eye. But instruments recorded it clearly, micro-delays, fractional repeats, moments that didn't quite align. It's stabilizing something, Lena whispered. Or destabilizing everything, someone else replied. She shook her head. No, this is controlled. The ship wasn't causing chaos. It was introducing order, just not the kind humanity recognized. Cinematic moment. Clocks desynchronizing objects, subtly shifting position. Reality bending just enough to feel wrong without breaking entirely. We need to respond, Lena said suddenly. The room turned to her. With what? Her assistant asked. Lena hesitated. Words wouldn't work. Signals wouldn't work. This entity didn't communicate through conventional means. It operated through structure, through logic, through something deeper than language. Math, she said finally. She moved quickly, pulling up a basic equation, something universal, something fundamental, a statement of understanding, of existence. If it's operating on higher rules, she said, then this is how we speak to it. Her fingers hovered for just a moment. Then she transmitted the equation. Silence filled the station as they waited. Seconds stretched. Then, the data shifted. Lena's eyes widened slightly. It's responding, not with words, not with signals, with correction. The equation she had sent came back, altered, refined, expanded, not rewritten, improved. Lena stared at it, her breath catching. That's... She couldn't finish the sentence, because she didn't have the words. It wasn't just advanced. It was elegant, beautiful, in a way that made her feel both insignificant and inspired at the same time. We got it wrong, she said softly. Not wrong, her assistant replied. Incomplete. Lena nodded slowly. Above them, the ship remained still for a moment longer. Then, without movement, without transition, it was gone. The fluctuations stopped instantly. Gravity stabilized. Time resumed its steady, predictable flow. The station fell into a stunned silence. Lena remained where she was, eyes locked on the corrected equation, still glowing on her screen. What does it mean? Someone asked quietly. She exhaled slowly, a faint, almost disbelieving smile forming. It means... She paused, searching for the right words. We've just had our first lesson. And for the first time in her life, Dr. Lena Iqbal felt like a beginner again. The pattern wasn't supposed to exist. That was the first thing Eli Marr realized. History, by its nature, was chaotic, messy, unpredictable, shaped by countless variables and human decisions. But patterns implied design, and design implied intent. Eli leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on a collection of archived images spanning thousands of years. Cave paintings, medieval sketches, early telescope recordings, classified space-age footage, different eras, different cultures, different technologies. And yet, the same shape, the same impossible silhouette, barely visible in the background of history's most pivotal moments. That's not coincidence, Eli whispered. His fingers trembled slightly as he zoomed in on another image, a crude drawing etched into stone, depicting figures looking up at the sky. Above them, faint but unmistakable. The ship, it had always been there, watching. The realization sent a chill down his spine. Humanity hadn't just discovered the unknown. The unknown had been observing humanity from the very beginning. Cinematic shift. Flashes of history, ancient skies, early civilizations. First rockets leaving Earth, all with the same silent presence hidden just out of focus. Eli dug deeper, cross-referencing timelines with known historical turning points. Every major leap, every moment where humanity stood on the edge of something new. The ship appeared, not interfering, not guiding, just present. Why now? Eli muttered. Because recently, everything had changed. The sightings were no longer hidden, no longer subtle. The ship had revealed itself openly, stepping out from the shadows of history into undeniable reality. Something had triggered it, something humanity had done, or become. The answer came quietly, buried in genetic research archives data. Most historians wouldn't even think to check. But Eli wasn't most historians. He followed patterns, wherever they led. This doesn't make sense, he said, scrolling through sequences of human DNA of the ocean. There were anomalies, tiny ones, almost invisible. Changes that didn't align with natural mutation rates. Changes that appeared at key points in human development. Eli's heart began to race. No way. He overlaid the timeline of those anomalies with the historical sightings. They matched perfectly. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. It didn't just watch us, Eli whispered. It shaped us. The idea was insane, terrifying. And yet, the evidence sat right in front of him, impossible to ignore. Humanity hadn't evolved entirely on its own. It had been nudged, adjusted, guided in ways so subtle no one had ever noticed. Until now, the implications were staggering. Free will, destiny, progress. How much of it had truly been human, and how much had been influenced? Eli sat there in silence, the weight of the realization pressing down on him. So what now? He asked quietly, as if expecting an answer. And for the first time, he got one. The lights in the archive room dimmed slightly. Not a failure, a response. Eli looked up slowly. You're here, he said. No fear. Just understanding. The air seemed to shift, like reality itself acknowledging his awareness. Why? He asked. Why us? There was no voice, no sound, but something changed. Outside, beyond the walls of the archive, beyond the atmosphere of Earth, the ship revealed itself fully for the first time. Not hidden, not distorted, clear, massive, undeniable. Eli stepped toward the window, his reflection merging with the distant shape in the sky. And in that moment, a single thought formed in his mind, not his own but perfectly understood. Not a command, not a warning, a statement. Simple, final. You are ready. The message arrived before the event it warned about. That alone should have been enough to shut everything down, to halt fleets, silence commands, force humanity to pause and ask the one question no one wanted to face. How do you receive a warning from a future that hasn't happened yet? But humanity had never been good at stopping, especially not when fear was involved. Commander Nix Calder stood in the dim glow of the war room, eyes fixed on the decoded transmission hovering in front of her. The words hadn't changed in the past 6 hours. They wouldn't. They were as simple as they were terrifying. Do not engage the ship. No explanation. No context. Just a directive. And beneath it, a signature. Her name. Nix exhaled slowly, her arms crossed as she stared at her own identity staring back at her like a ghost. Tell me this is a mistake, one of the officers said quietly. Nix didn't respond immediately, because she already knew the truth. It's not, she said finally. The encryption is mine. The command codes are mine. A pause. I sent this. The room fell silent. That's impossible, someone whispered. Nix almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because impossible had lost all meaning the moment the unknown ship entered their reality. So is everything else about this, she replied calmly. Outside, beyond the reinforced walls of the command station, the ship had already appeared, silent, waiting, watching, just like the reports described, and just like the message had warned. We followed the directive, one officer said firmly. We stand down, and if it's a trap, another, countered, if not engaging, is exactly what it wants. The room fractured into debate almost instantly. Fear didn't unify people. It divided them. Some saw the message as salvation, a chance to avoid catastrophe. Others saw it as manipulation, proof that the enemy was already influencing them. Nix remained silent, listening, watching, thinking. This wasn't just strategy. This was something deeper. A paradox. Because if she followed the message, she would be ensuring the future where she sent it. And if she didn't, that future might never exist. Commander, the general's voice cut through the tension. We need a decision. Nix stepped forward, her gaze shifting from the message to the live feed of the ship. It hovered in orbit, unmoving, as if it already knew what she would choose. And that's what unsettled her the most. Not its presence, not its power, its certainty. If I sent this message, she said slowly, then I must have had a reason. Exactly, one officer said. So we follow it. Nix shook her head slightly. Or I sent it because I knew I wouldn't. Silence. The logic hit harder than any argument. Because it meant one thing. The message wasn't a solution. It was a warning about herself. Cinematic moment. Nix, staring at her own name, reflected in the glass, overlapping with the distant ship beyond. Every outcome leads here, she murmured. The message doesn't stop it. Her eyes hardened slightly. It confirms it. She reached out, her hand hovering over the command interface. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. Followed the message and trust a future she didn't understand. Ignore it and risk becoming the reason it existed in the first place. Either way, The outcome was uncertain. But one thing was clear. The choice had to be hers. Not dictated by fear. Not controlled by something that already knew the ending. Nyx took a slow breath, then made her decision. Weapons online, she said. The room froze. Commander, that's an order. The systems responded instantly, powering up with a low, ominous hum. Targeting arrays locked onto the silent ship. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then the ship reacted. Not with movement, not with force, with change. Space around it seemed to distort, folding slightly inward like reality itself was adjusting. Nyx's breath caught. This is new, she whispered. Because this hadn't happened in the message. This wasn't part of the future she remembered. The ship wasn't responding the same way. It was adapting. The paradox had broken. The future had shifted, and something else had taken its place. The screens flickered. New data flooded. Unfamiliar. Unreadable. Wrong. Nyx stared at it, a cold realization settling deep in her chest. We changed it, someone said, almost in disbelief. Nyx didn't look away from the display. No, she said quietly. We replaced it. A pause. Her voice dropped, heavier now. And whatever comes next. Her eyes locked onto the shifting form of the ship. Was never meant to happen.